Welcome to Conversations with Cox and Kielseth, and to be more specific, that is filmmaker Alex Cox and myself, film curator Pablo Kielseth. Alex will join us by phone from his home in Oregon, while I sneak away from my office to call him from one of the projection booths used by the International Film Series, which has been screening foreign and independent movies at CU Boulder since 1941. We will keep our chats to about 20 minutes as we discuss whatever movie-related topics grab our fancy. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, action.
Feeling 7 up, I'm feeling 7 up. Feeling 7 up, I'm feeling 7 up.
Alex, it's good to talk to you.
Likewise.
I'm going to make myself at home here with a Epic Brewing Big Bad Baptist Imperial Stout.
Oh, well, that sounds very nice. Well, when the time comes, I shall be having a Pearl IPA
Nice.
from Bend, Colorado.
Okay. Well, first I should start by saying that we should pay our respects to the fact that Buck Henry passed away yesterday.
Oh, he was a very funny man, very funny and very good actor.
Yeah, writer of Catch-22, or not the writer, but a screenwriter for Catch-22 and Candy and The Graduate, of course. And then he also directed the 1970s version of Heaven Can Wait and acted in a lot of things, including The Player, The Man Who Fell to Earth, Eating Raoul, and Shortcuts. But so The Graduate is, for me, one of those films that I always gravitate toward when I'm thinking about great movies that came out that were released when I was born. I was born in 1967. Other films that come to mind for 1967 are 5 Million Years to Earth, Point Blank, Bonnie and Clyde, Cool Hand Luke. 5 Million Years to Earth is a little bit of a cheat on my end because it was released in the UK in 67, but not in the US until 68. But as I was thinking about movies that are being released on certain years, and oh, by the way, today the Spring 2020 International Film Series calendars were deposited on my doorstep, and I've been taking them around.
Oh, congratulations.
Distribution, thank you. And one of the films that we're going to be showing very soon is Michael Apted's 63 Up. And you've seen some of those, I presume, or have you?
I don't think I ever watched them because I wasn't really very interested in being a young English person growing up at that time.
Yeah.
I wasn't very interested in documentaries of that ilk, you know, a kind of social documentary about what I assume was the working class or the lower middle class, you know. I mean, I wasn't so... I'd rather watch stuff about cowboys or spacemen, you know.
Ah, well, so here's where we're going to do a little dovetail, because it's not necessary for you to have seen any of the Michael Apted installations, but for those who are listening, the premise behind it was that he started in 1963 with 14 people and filmed them when they were 7, and then again when they were 14, and so on, every 7 years, revisiting.
21, 28, so
yeah. Right. Because I was thinking, boy, if someone were filming me when I was 7, I'd really be far more interesting if they were catching what movies I was walking out of or watching at that time. So I was thinking about the movies that came out, that were released when I was 7 years old, and then the movies that came out when I was 14. Now I thought, as a little experiment, a little thought experiment.
So why did you pick? So why did you pick the dates 1961 and 1968, which have nothing to do with what you just mentioned?
Well, sir, I believe that you would have been 7 years old during the first.
Oh, me.
Yes.
I see.
Yep, and then you would have been 14 during the second. Is that right?
It's true, yeah, that's right. So I would have been, because I was born in 1954, so I would have turned 7 in 1961. That's true.
So
therefore, British films of 61 and 68, therefore, to fit that frame.
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned the difference in release dates between US releases and UK releases, because the question that I have for you, sir, is I am interested in what films you watched that were released in the UK when you were 7. And then if you'll give me the torch, and I'll tell you what films I would have watched when I was 7. What do you say?
Well, I don't think I really saw any of those films in 1961, actually, because if I went to the cinema at the age of 7, it would have been with my parents. And so we would have been to see a film which interested them, which they thought might be suitable for a child.
All right.
So,
Well, now let's not be literal about this, and rather let's talk about the films from that list that you now would revisit. Like, you know them, you've seen them at some point, but they came out when you were 7 and you would revisit them.
Well, here's what I thought, interestingly enough, was that the films, I went through that list and I'm thinking, all these great films, and then the films I was thinking of as really great films from that time period were actually from 62 and 63. And that 61 is kind of like a waiting room for good cinema. So there's a couple of good films on the list. I mean, The Innocents is probably the best, isn't it? The Turn of the Screw adaptation,
which
by
we're
Jack
showing,
Clayton, is very
which
high.
we're bringing to the calendar, to the International Film Series, actually.
As I recall, that's a very, very good film. Really creepy and a really good, scary movie.
And for people listening right now, they should know that that will be on the big screen with introduction by Sabrina Negri. And that's playing in Munzinger on March 10th. So I'm glad you mentioned that. That's serendipitous.
That was the best of the list, really. I thought, there's a Taste of Honey, but A Taste of Honey is kind of early English kitchen sink, lower middle class, working class drama. It's not as good as the film that Tony Richardson made the following year, The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, which is a great masterpiece. And so in that sense, it feels like kind of like the waiting. Whistle Down the Wind. I actually did see Whistle Down the Wind. I don't think I saw it the year it came out, but I probably saw it on television. And that's about some kids who find a guy who's hiding out, who's like a kind of a fugitive from justice. I'm not quite sure what justice he's fleeing from, but he's hiding out, and they think he's Jesus. They think that Jesus is living next door. That was sort of a charming, as I recall, black and white movie.
Right.
Victim, doing my research, I'm thinking Victim, I should know about Victim. What do I know about it? It's a gay-themed film, but what do I know about it,
Isn't Victim one of the first films to address homosexuality kind of out in the open in a mainstream movie?
Yeah. According to the article that I read, it's the first film in the English language to use the word homosexual.
Well, that's
dialogue.
interesting.
That word had never been spoken in a film before, and of course, being gay in England to be a gay man in England was a crime up until 1967. You could go to jail.
Yeah.
Not being a lesbian was not a crime, and the story was because this was all like the English royal family were very incensed by homosexuality, and so Queen Victoria, though, had refused to believe that there could be lesbians because she couldn't see how they would do it. So female homosexuality was always legal in England, but I guess the Victorians had criminalized it, male homosexuality. So the movie addresses that, which is an interesting socio-filmic thing of the time. But again, I don't know if it was a great film.
Yeah, the royals seem to lack a certain imagination when it comes to sexuality, it seems. But so let me. I'll jump in here with.
But wait, there's two more films from
please.
'61 though, which I think are of interest. Two British films. If again, and I don't know if they're good or not because I don't think I've seen either of them. Savage Guns and The Singer, Not the Song, and both of those are British westerns filmed, I think, in Spain.
I have not heard of either of them.
The Singer, Not the Song has Dirk Bogarde in it, and I think it's a Western, but somehow I haven't seen it, and I didn't mention it in the Italian Western book. Well, because it's not an Italian Western, it's a British Western, I think, that was shot in Spain.
And Dirk Bogarde was also in Victim, right? If I'm remembering correctly.
Oh, that's right. There's two Dirk Bogarde movies, so he's the highlight of '61 in terms of acting, British actors. But if you think about what came right after that, in like '62, Lawrence of Arabia and Lolita, The Long Distance Runner, the first James Bond movie, and then in '63, Dr. Strangelove, This Sporting Life, Billy Liar, another James Bond film. You know, I mean, it's sort of the English cinema just sort of kicked into high gear, it feels, the year that Lawrence of Arabia came out, which is the following year.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think that we have these ideas of certain eras or moments that were a little hotter than others. Because when I came up with my own list, because mine would have been for 74 and 81, and I immediately thought, oh, well, you know, the 70s is going to be twice as long as the one from 1981, but that was not true. And that was interesting to note. So I'll interject
Well, what
with
was your 74? What's your 74 list?
Okay, so my list, and this is when I was 7 years old, these are the movies that are of note. Half of these I actually did see when I was that age of 7. The other half I would come across later, but I would revisit now and still put on my list of, you know, important movies. 74, we had Ali Fear Eats the Soul, Blazing Saddles, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, California Split, The Cars That Ate Paris, Chinatown, The Conversation, which is getting re-released on a new restoration and 35 print this year, Dark Star, Female Trouble, The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, which I saw in the at the Boulder Theater. Ray Harryhausen's effects, of course, had a big impact on me, and that was a perfect movie for a 7-year-old. The Parallax View, Swept Away. I'd see that one later, of course. The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, A Woman Under the Influence, and Young Frankenstein. Now these are going alphabetical.
Wow.
The very last one, because you know Z, of course. Ironically, I've never seen Zardoz, but I don't think that would necessarily fit with the rest of them. But strangely enough, I've always meant to see it, but I've never seen it. But I know that you mentioned Ali Fear Eats the Soul in your book for Intro to Film Studies. Was that the right?
Yeah, I think that's a very good film, isn't it?
And then Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia.
Oh yeah, and The Parallax View, and
yes. Well, definitely, I knew the Parallax, and I think you're also a fan of Dark Star, or are you? I'm not sure.
Dark Star's okay. I think Dark Star's very interesting because it's got a great song at the end, or sort of the country song that ends the thing, and it's very funny. But what's really I find very interesting is it's Alien. It's a very low budget version of Alien.
Yeah, it's a precursor to it,
which Dan O'Bannon just it's the same movie. Except that in Dark Star, the alien is a beach ball with webbed feet.
That's correct. Yeah, it's Dan O'Bannon's same screenwriter, and it's basically a template for Alien without all the KY jelly and the really horrific monster.
Same story is they're isolated in a spacecraft out there. I think they're orbiting the Earth, or maybe they're on a mining mission. Maybe it's another mining mission, and then the craft is invaded by this toxic creature who kills them all one by one. But it's a beach ball.
Well, let me ask you, how are you? We've had conversations about how, you know, I like horror and you don't like horror. You like westerns and I like westerns too. But you're an author of a book on spaghetti westerns, and I could spend the rest of my life probably trying to catch up to you on the westerns. But in terms of comedies,
you could write a book about horror films.
Well. There's plenty of them out there. I'd rather read them, frankly. But look, I want to get to the idea of comedies, because your films can be very funny. So what's your, like, for instance, how do you feel about Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein?
Oh, they're great films. They're both great films. Absolutely wonderful films. I mean, Young Frankenstein even more so because it's visually so perfect. It's such a homage to The Bride of Frankenstein and James Whale, and the look, that German expressionist, fantastic look. It's a wonderful film, yeah.
And what about something?
And so is Blazing Saddles is a wonderful film.
Yeah, no. There's no. You won't get any guff from me on that. What about something like The Cars That Ate Paris? Because that's not comedy. That's certainly, but it's a little bit more on the sci-fi, and because of the car element. I'm curious if did that ever get on your radar? Did you watch that one?
Yeah, it did. It got like really good write-ups in the English kind of BFI monthly film bulletin. It had a real buzz around it, sight and sound, and so I was all excited to see it. It just didn't do it for me, as it were.
Yeah.
I wasn't. It didn't excite me very much. We had the beginning of even though it's called The Cars at Paris, it's an Australian film, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And we had in England these 2 Australian films, which were hugely successful worldwide, and funded the Australian film industry. And they were, I think it was Bruce Beresford's The Adventures of Barry Mackenzie.
Yeah.
And the sequel, Bazza Pulls It Off. And they were just excellent films. They were so funny. Films about this Australian guy going to England and being totally ripped off and exploited by the English. And he was like totally drunk all the time and always cheerful, you know. And it was just, they were great films. And so that was what I really loved about the origins of the new Australian cinema. But that's veering away from The Cars at Paris.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a touch of Australia on my list for 81 with Gallipoli, but before I go there, let's flip over to the list of the films that would have been released when you were 14. Was there anything there that caught your eye?
Oh yeah, well these are all films that I did. So by now I was going to the cinema by the time I was 14, and so I went to see 2001, of course, and Carry On Up the Khyber, talking about comedies, because we loved the Carry On films, and The Charge of the Light Brigade, which I didn't like so much at the time. I haven't seen it since. And horror films. I saw a whole load of horror films, like Blood of Fu Manchu and The Devil Rides Out, you know, and of course Lindsay Anderson's If. Oh yeah. His first masterpiece.
Yes.
And an even more amazing masterpiece, which I guess was made in '68 but didn't come out until 1970 because the studio was so horrified by it. Performance,
yeah. But that wasn't 1968.
So I didn't get
Yeah, that would have been.
It was made in '68, but it didn't actually get a release until 1970. I think I didn't see it probably until '73 or something like that. But that's a pretty amazing film.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
a film of extraordinary brilliance.
Yeah, no, that was definitely, and it captured some of the swinging '60s and the hedonistic, and of course you got Mick Jagger and the whole thing in there. So. Oh
yeah, but it's also, I mean, it's entirely sexually transgressive, and it's a great gangster movie, and it's got like the first rock video in it, you know, Memo to Turner.
And now, is that the first rock video?
Well, we can debate that, can't we? But I suppose it would be one of the first. It's like a freestanding musical sequence within the movie where Mick Jagger just sings to the audience, you know, sings to the camera.
Yeah.
So.
Memo to Turner. Great song.
Yeah. Yeah, and so anyway, so what a year for films. And those are just the ones I saw. There were so many other films. Those are just the British films, or all the American films I saw that year as well.
Yeah, no, that 68 sounded, 2001 A Space Odyssey alone would have made 68 a fantastic year for cinema. But, so I'm getting, Jason
so what about
tapping
74? Oh, he's tapping. You better say what yours were.
He's tapping his watch. He's like, okay, you're about to run into the end of Alex's recording gear over there. So. Okay,
yeah, you tell me but you haven't told me yet what your. Let me see what my time is here. 20 minutes. So we got about 5 more minutes. You can tell me what yours were.
Oh, 81. Like I was surprised to see that 81 was actually even longer. When I was 14, I mean. The stuff that was coming out, it was American Werewolf in London, Blood Wedding, Blowout, Body Heat, Das Boot, Christiana F., Clash of the Titans, Cutter's Way, Dead and Buried, The Decline of Western Civilization, Diva, which I know is it's sort of polished and maybe not in the same vein, but still, for me, I did see that as a 14-year-old, and it had an impact on me. The Entity, a very haunting a ghost movie. Escape from New York, The Evil Dead, the first one, The Funhouse, Tobe Hooper again, and Gallipoli, as mentioned before, Oliver Stone's very first film, The Hand. I saw it on television. It actually, Heavy Metal, the first film that I ever got stoned for. The Howling, Mad Max 2, Mommy Dearest, Miss 45. Of course, I would see Abel Ferrara's films a little bit later in life. I wasn't, but not much later. I did see Outland when it was released. Which is basically a Western. In fact, is that based on, is that High Noon in Space? Is that right?
You know, I don't think I saw Outland. I saw most of these films, but I think I gave Outland I don't know why I didn't see it.
Well, I'll also have to give out a shout to Pennies from Heaven because it's got a great dance sequence from Christopher Walken in there. Possession, which we just showed at the IFS not too many years ago on a nice print. Prince of the City, Scanners, and I think you and I will agree on Scanners.
Great.
Yeah.
Scanners is wonderful.
And Time Bandits, I'm going to guess that you'll take a pass on that one.
I never saw Time Bandits.
Well,
never saw it.
And then we get to the Z's again, and
Uh-huh.
there's nothing there except Zorro the Gay Blade. So again, the Z's are a bust both years.
I'm sorry.
All right, well, I didn't mean to power through just so many titles on that one, but I do want to fit them in before your taping discontinues on your end. So,
well, you had a lot of titles there. You had a lot of films.
but it's surprising, isn't it? 1981. It wasn't too
recalled.
bad. Not too bad. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think many of those titles are very good.
Well, now again, some of those you have to understand.
I mean, I'm trying to think of the great films of 1984 or whatever, or 81, and I can't think of many great films from the early 80s.
Now I'm going to go back and say, let me clarify. Some of those are great films, but not all of them. But I was 14 years old, and some of them are on that list because they have
Decline of Western Civilization is a good documentary.
Absolutely, yes. But no, I mean, come on. I mean, there's. I actually do think that like The Howling is pretty outstanding, and Prince of the City. Actually, I didn't mention Southern Comfort. That one's also on there. I forgot. All right. Well, listen, we should wrap up here and catch up again next week. If you're around.
Very good. Yeah, that sounds good. I should still be. I'll figure out where I'm going to be, and we'll be in constant contact, and we'll speak next week.
All right. Sounds good, Alex. Take care.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Yep. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
It's a crisp, refreshing feeling, crystal clear and light. America's drinking 7-Up, and it sure feels right. Feeling lucky 7.
Kevin, stop singing, man.
Huh? Wasn't singing, guy.
I'm standing right next to you and you're fucking singing. Cut it out.
Thanks again for joining Alex Cox and myself today. I'd like to thank Jason Phelps for handling the audio and Ted Thacker for letting us use the intro to his song, The Ballad of Slim Cessna, for the musical cues that bookend these conversations. Don't forget to go out there and watch movies in a larger-than-home venue. It's what brings us all together to see movies the way they were meant to be seen. On the big screen, as we sit next to strangers, neighbors, and friends.